so China just dropped Kimi K3, the largest open source AI model ever made. It just took the #1 spot on almost all the AI coding benchmarks, beating Claude Fable 5 itself, and within hours, people were using it to remake CS2 from a single prompt, building entire websites, and even creating a working Game Boy Advance emulator. So today, I'm going to show you the most insane things people are creating with this model. Alright, so first I'm going to show you some of the best game dev examples of the Kimi K3 model. The very first one is Kimi K3 making a first-person shooter game, similar to Counter-Strike, and it looks pretty good. This entire game was created using a single prompt. It looks absolutely insane, and it actually plays pretty well. There are full 3D models of people, and the user is able to shoot guns at them and everything. Overall, this is a very impressive game generation example, and it basically shows us exactly what we can expect from this model. Moving on, here is another example of a first-person shooter. This example is by a user named Chutus Lua. As you can see, this one also looks pretty good, and the overall bullet animations are really nice here. The main takeaway is that creating these types of environments is normally very complicated for AI models, so it is highly impressive that Kimi K3 was able to pull this off with just a simple prompt. Now, I have to say, the environment is not as detailed as it could be, but with a few more prompts, I think we would be able to achieve a much better environment, and the game would look a lot more beautiful. Regardless, it is an absolutely insane example of the model's capabilities. Here is another impressive game made using Kimi K3. The creator of the game, a user named Chong Yu, basically built a Paper Mario inspired game using Kimi K3 and Grok build as the harness. I actually think it is very important to have some kind of harness here to get the best results for a game like this, rather than just using the model natively on the web. Having a harness, like Cursor or Claude Code, gives the models more capabilities and essentially more tools to make the game better. As you can see, this specific game is pretty good. The character animation is especially impressive. The movement of the character actually looks fun, and the overall environment of the game is very nice. There are also NPCs that the character can talk to, which is a great feature to have. Overall, I think this was another very good example of game development, and now here is a comparison between Fable 5, Kimi K3, and GPT 5.6 in terms of their game development capabilities. The specific game they are trying to recreate here is Flappy Bird. As you can see, Kimi K3 performs exactly on par with GPT 5.6 and Fable 5. In fact, I actually think the game UI for Kimi K3 is a little bit better than the UI from Fable 5, which is really interesting and very nice to see. Another major point here is the cost of creating the game. The Kimi K3 game only cost around $0.024. That's just over 2 cents, whereas Fable 5 cost around 40 cents, and GPT 5.6 Sol cost 15 cents. As you can see, Kimi K3 is just much cheaper than these other models, and that definitely adds up. It is significantly cheaper than the state-of-the-art models in the US, while still performing at the exact same level. That is incredibly impressive. Here's a similar example comparing Kimi K3 versus Fable 5 and GPT 5.6. Here they are trying to make a 2D Space Invaders kind of arcade game. I think Kimi K3 is quite a bit better than Fable 5 and GPT-6 here. The game made by GPT-6 is very chaotic. In contrast, the game from Kimi K3 is much more structured and controlled, rather than the constant chaos of the GPT 5.6 version. So I think Kimi K3 gave us the best result here. The unfortunate thing is that Fable 5 was not as great in this specific generation as I had hoped. It actually performed even worse than GPT 5.6 Sol in this example. Next up is a comparison between all the frontier models of the United States versus Kimi K3, specifically for creating a 3D model of a roulette wheel. This first example is a photorealistic European roulette wheel. As you can see, Kimi K3 performs on par with all the frontier models, and I think it is actually much better than the builds from Grok 4.5 and GPT 5.6 Sol. Overall, it looks much nicer than the other models. Next, we get to see a 3D model of a Las Vegas slot machine. Here too, Kimi K3 K3 performs pretty well, but the design of the slot wheel does not look as appealing to me as the one made by Fable 5, so for this one I think Kimi K3 is actually not quite on par with Fable 5. Lastly, we get a full 3D pinball game table. As you can see, no model performed incredibly well here, but still for the cost, Kimi K3 did give us a pretty nice result. Overall, I think Kimi K3 performed really well when you take into account the cost that was spent. If we factor that in, the 3D model generations were pretty great. Also, in terms of front-end design, Kimi K3 is simply the best. It is much better than Claude Fable 5. As you can see in this example, the prosthetic hand mechanics of Kimi K3 are much better than those from Fable 5. I also think for this specific example, Fable 5 didn't even try to produce something half as good as Kimi K3. The controls of the prosthetic hand here are much more realistic than the flat 2D type of hand that Fable 5 created. I really don't understand why it created a 2D hand at all. So overall, Kimi K3 is just much better in terms of front-end development. Here's another example, a Game Boy Advance emulator built using Kimi K3. We can put the virtual cartridges in here, and it will automatically load the game that we want to play and actually start running it. Moving on, here's a black hole simulation by Kimi K3. As you can see, this is not exactly perfect, but it is much better than most of the other models. The scattering effect of the light here is absolutely insane, along with the distortion of space. Overall, this was a very good generation. Here's another really good example of the front-end capabilities of this specific model. It is currently ranked as the #1 front-end model for creating beautiful animations, websites, or really anything that has to do with UI design. As you can see in this specific chart, Kimi K3 is just a lot better than Claude Fable 5 or GPT 5.6 Sol X High, and here's an actual example of a website created using Kimi K3. As you can see, this website is particularly insane, featuring smooth typographical animations and premium transitions between pages. This is overall just much better than anything we have previously seen, and it perfectly demonstrates the front-end capabilities of Kimi K3. And finally, here's a direct comparison between Kimi K3 and GPT 5.6 Sol. The prompt here was, please devote your efforts to create a large 3D photorealistic procedural visualizer of a meteor hitting the city in one HTML code block. Here's the result of Kimi K3, and below is GPT 5.6 Sol. I actually have to say, the meteor crash animation of Kimi K3 is better, but the visual effect of the crash itself is much better on GPT 5.6 Sol. So both models have their own advantages in this specific animation. I think it is very close, but because of the impact effect on the city, I would have to say GPT 5.6 is just a tiny bit better than Kimi K3 here. So that was about it for the video. I'll see you in the next one.